So hello everyone. Today we are going to do exercise 6.4, and I'm doing the unit 1, which is the caramel sticky buns. So in front of me is all the ingredient we need for this recipe. Here is the all-purpose flour, sugar, salt, yeast, warm milk, margarine, and then here's like the cutted pecans and margarine again. And here, this 3 is the topping for the caramel. It is the caramel topping, and then here, for the dried cranberry, brown sugar, and the cinnamon is the filling for this bun. So before I really start making this recipe, a little tips for chopping the pecans. So instead of chopping them on the board, I find it is easier to you put them into a Ziploc bag and then use the rollers to kind of crush it. Just crush, not roll it, because if you roll it too much, then it will become little really small pieces. So the pieces around this size is good. So now it's time for us to start making the recipe. So it is simple. So first we have a KitchenAid mixer, and then this is the bowl of that. We just combine all the ingredients, all the first 8 ingredients into this bowl. So that is all-purpose flour, sugar, some salt, and the yeast. From here, I would like to mix all those ingredients together, just to making sure the yeast is everywhere. So that is easier for them later to get a fermentation. So yeah, things around like that is good. And then we will pour the warm milk. So I just microwave the milk before I start the recipe. So it was around 45 degrees. So no more than that, because if the temperature is too high, you're actually gonna kill the yeast. So you just pour the milks in. And the recipe also requires eggs. And then here we are cutting the recipe into half. So I'm only gonna beaten half of eggs into the bowl. So beaten the eggs before you pour it in. And I will only use half of it. So around half. Then we just bring this bowl into the KitchenAid mixer, and then we mix it in a low speed. And by the way, I forgot the margarine before, so now I just added it before actually beating them. So if you have a KitchenAid mixer at home, make sure you lock the bowl properly. Otherwise, the bowl will shake during the mixing step. So now we put on low speed and let it mix for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we will see how it goes. If the bun is too sticky, then we will add some more flours. So while you're rolling the dough, you can start to prepare the mixing and the filling for the buns. So here I'm gonna prepare the filling first. So that is brown sugar. It is very simple. You just mix all the ingredients into a bowl, and that is the dried cranberries, and here is the cinnamon powder. So this one definitely has cinnamon. So if you don't like the smell or the taste of cinnamon, then you may not like this one. So here, after all the ingredients mixing in the bowl, you just have a spoon or something to mix it well. So like that is good. Then you can just put them on the side, and then we can start to prepare the toppings. For the toppings, we have a corn syrup, brown sugar, and margarine. So the margarine needs to be soft at room temperature. So first we put the margarine in, and then the brown sugar. Last will be the corn syrup. So again, because we're cutting this recipe in half, so the filling and the topping also we cut it in half as well. So that's why you see the ingredient a little bit the amount of the ingredient is a little bit different than you saw in the recipe. So a bit of corn syrup, and just like mix them all together because the margin is like soft, so it is easier for us to do that. So after the margin is like mixed well with the brown sugar and the corn syrup, the topping will look like that, and that means it is ready to use. Okay, so after around 10 minutes rolling in the mixers, the dough is looking like that right now. I just took it out from the bowl so that it's easier for you to see. So now I'm just gonna put it back, and I will cover it with plastic wraps and let them to sit in the room temperature to like 30 minutes for the yeast to do its work. And when it's on the double size, it is time for us to process for the next step. But then in the meanwhile, we can just like kind of spread the toppings for in the baking sheet. So here is the toppings we prepared before, and since there's already margin in there, so it is not really necessary for us to like spray the baking sheet. Sorry, the baking pan. So we just scoop them in and then kind of spread them in the bottom. Just making sure the toppings are nice and evenly spread on the baking pan, so then later when you bake it, the caramel will be like cover all the bread. Yeah. So after we spread all the toppings on the baking pan, we will sprinkle the pecans on. Just nice and evenly sprinkle them. So here it is. That is the preparation for the preparation step for the cinnamon bun. So then we can bake for 30 minutes for the dough to raise up. So now let's continue with the exercise 6.4 unit 1. And here, after like definitely more than 30 minutes resting, the dough is like double the size. I think we use around like 2 hours, so be patient. If the dough is not raising, just put them in a warm place and then like let them to double its size by itself. So now we take the dough out of the pot, the bowl, and we dust the surface with some flour to make sure they are not kind of sticking on the table. And then gently. So by doing this, you let the air in the dough come out, and then we will use a roller to roll the dough into like a rectangle. This is gonna take you a while, and it's gonna be harder than you thought. So it definitely takes time and be patient. And all-purpose flour is very hard to like roll. Okay, so the dough looks like that right now, and don't be worried if it's not a perfect rectangles, because nobody gonna be really perfect on that. So as long as you have the length and the size, it's gonna be fine. And unfortunately, I don't have any trick on that. It will be very hard, and it's gonna be like a workout. And then we're gonna spread the margins on top of the dough with the spoon. So here it is. The marine will help the fillings to stay on the dough. And then the little trick in here is that to make sure this edge does not have any marine, and as well as the edge on the side, because later you're actually gonna roll the dough, and then you want to those two like edges attached on the dough. So if there's a marine on them, it will be very hard for them to attaching with each other. So you will see later. And now you just like sprinkle the fillings on the dough. Just nice and evenly. Make sure like everywhere have sugars and cranberries. So here we go. According to the recipe, we're gonna roll it from the longer side. So we roll like that. Trying to roll it very tight so there's not much air in here. Here we go. So then we kind of put it better to see. We kind of like push those here together. So that's why I'm saying better there's no margin on this side. Otherwise, the margin will not allow them to stay with each other. And also don't forget to seal the edges of the dough. So now we're gonna cut it into approximately like a 3 centimeters circle, and then the first like the edge of the dough I just gonna discard it because there's no fillings, and start from here. Trying to keep it in a round shape. So here we go. The dough has been cutted. And then as you remember, that is the topping we prepared before. So now we just gonna put the dough in the pan. And make sure you leave some space between each dough because they're gonna like in a warm place and they're gonna raise up again. So here it is. We will cover this again and then let them to rest in the room temperature for another 30 minutes until they are double its size. Then we'll put them into the oven. So after 30 minutes resting, now let's back to the caramel sticky buns. So as you can see here, it is like almost double its size. So if you can compare with the pictures before, you will see it like raise up. So then we will put this one into the oven. The oven is preheated to 350, and then we will put on the middle rack of the oven. And this one is just a little bit extra. We cannot fit into this plate, so I have another little bread baking plate for that. And then we'll let it in the oven around 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, we will check. Okay, so it's almost the time. And we will pull the sticky caramel buns from the oven. It already smells really good. So as you can see in the camera, it turns to a nice golden brown color, and then the caramel in the bottom are actually bubbling. So it's very hot, be careful. And we will let them to sit on the stove for around 2 to 3 minutes or even more until this caramel became a kind of solid. Then we will flip it over, so then you can see the nice caramel topping on the top. And here I also have 3 buns that without caramel topping, so you can see the color is quite different, and this doesn't really look like a bun. more look like a cookie to me. So this tells us that the caramel topping is very important for this caramel sticky buns. Okay, so now it's after a few minutes resting on the stove, and the caramel is cooled down, so I can use my hand to touch the pan. That means it's not like hot at all. So we're gonna flip it up. I will just use aluminum paper and cover that and flip them really fast. See here, and I hope it came out. As you see, there's some pecans sticking on the top, on the bottom of the pan. So I will grab a fork and then I will just scoop them on the top of the cinnamon buns. Okay, so now I just trying to scoop the caramel topping on top of the bun. So there's a small mistake we made, that is we wait for too long. So before I said yes, this pan is not hot, so I can use my hand to touch it, but I think that means I waited too long. So I probably gonna, like next time if I made it, I will just flip it over when it's still hot, so I can make sure all the caramel topping are actually on top of the bun, so I don't need to like scoop them on here right now. So yeah, but I mean, I'm sure it's gonna still taste delicious. So yeah, hope you will enjoy it.
Hi everyone, this is exercise 6.4. I'm doing unit 2, which is the sun-dried tomato and artichoke bread. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start with some of the dry ingredients. So this bread uses a whole wheat flour, and I've already measured 2 cups of flour into the bowl. I'm going to add the yeast, so a tablespoon of yeast and a teaspoon of salt. Then I'm just going to mix this up so it's all incorporated together. You'll notice that I started with just 2 cups of the flour, and the recipe calls for 3.5 to 4 cups. So as we're kneading the dough together, we'll be incorporating more of the flour. So this is all mixed up, and the next step is to heat the wet ingredients. So I'm going to add to a saucepan 3/4 of a cup of water, 3/4 of a cup of milk. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of honey, and 2 tablespoons of canola oil. So I'm going to stir and heat this on the stove. We want it to get very warm, but not anywhere near a simmer. So we're looking for 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so I've brought this up to 50 degrees Celsius, so it's ready to go. I'm going to bring it back over to my dry ingredients. Okay, I'm going to add the heated liquid to the dry. And then we're going to mix this up together. The reason that we heat the liquid ingredients is for the yeast to do its work, and it's important not to overheat it, because if it gets too hot, then the yeast is killed and then it won't do its job. Okay, so I'm going to incorporate more of the flour. So I've just measured another cup here, and I'm going to start slowly and just keep adding as I think it needs it. So you want a dough that is a little bit soft but stiff enough to kind of hold together. I actually think I'm going to stop there with the flour for now, and I'm just going to empty this out onto my bench. I'm going to keep the flour handy to keep adding as I need to reduce the stickiness if it's too sticky, and I'm going to go ahead and start kneading this dough. You want to keep the surface nicely floured so it doesn't stick. And this could take several minutes. It could take up to about 7 minutes or so. So as it's sticking to my hand, then I'm just adding a little bit more flour. But I'm also not afraid of it being a little bit sticky. I'll know that it's ready when the dough is smooth and when it's elastic. Okay, so I've been kneading for quite a while. I would say 7 to 9 minutes, and the dough is feeling different now. So I think it's ready. It's smooth. It's elastic. So I'm just going to let this rest for 10 to 15 minutes before I try to roll it out. And I'm going to put it on a floured surface so it doesn't stick to the table. And then I'm going to cover it. I like to cover in plastic wrap. I find that helps. But you could also use a tea towel for that. So while that's resting, I'm going to quickly put our fillings for the bread together. And the first step is to broil the artichoke hearts. So I had canned artichoke hearts that I drained, and then I chopped them up pretty small because they're going to go inside of the bread. And I'm just putting them on a cookie sheet, and I'm going to broil them in the oven until they're lightly browned. And I expect that to take about 6 or 7 minutes. So I'm going to pop this in the oven while I'm waiting for my dough to rest. Okay, I've lightly browned the artichoke hearts, and I'm just going to add that to a bowl with my other savory ingredients. And this will be the filling for the bread. I chopped up some sun-dried tomatoes, and then also a 1/4 cup of fresh basil, along with a little bit of canola oil. So I'm going to stir this up, and then after the dough is rolled out, this is going to form the filling for the bread. Okay, so this dough has been resting for 15 minutes. You can tell that it's changed a little bit in shape. It must be warm in this room because it's already puffed up a little bit. And I'm going to take a rolling pin and roll it out on a floured surface. I'm going to roll it so that it'll fit onto the baking pan I have beside me. And we're going to be rolling it up kind of jelly roll style with the savory ingredients in the middle. It's a good idea to make as close to a rectangle as you can, which means keeping the ends kind of even, because that helps the bread to bake evenly. Okay. I think I'm going to stop there. And then I'm going to spread the filling into a pretty even layer. I won't go right to the ends just because a little bit of it might ooze out as I'm rolling up. Okay, so now I'm going to roll this up pretty tightly. So I don't want lots of air pockets. I haven't made this bread before, but it smells super delicious. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. And as you'll notice some little bits are spilling out, and I want them in the bread, so I'm just gonna put them back in the center. Okay, so this is our roll. I'm going to put it on the greased pan that I prepared. Just fits. And then I'm going to cover this in plastic wrap and let it sit until it doubles in size. The recipe instructions don't specify a time. It's pretty warm in this room, so I'm gonna guess maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour, but I'll keep an eye on it as it proofs. Okay, I'm ready to finish up with the bread. It's been proofing for 50 minutes approximately. So I'm gonna remove the plastic wrap, and then I'm gonna make an egg wash to brush over the top. That will make for some nice browning. So I'm gonna crack an egg and add in a tablespoon of water. Just whisk that up a little bit. Okay, and then I'll brush this on all over the top of the bread. Okay, and this is going to go in the oven. I've preheated it to 375 degrees, and it needs about 45 minutes in there. Okay, I pulled our sun-dried artichoke bread out of the oven. I've let it sit for just a minute or two. And I just want to show you the inside. We're going to cut into it and take a look at that swirl in the middle. And there we go. You can see the filling. Looks like I could have rolled it a little bit tighter because there's a bit of an air pocket in the top, but it looks pretty good.